Coming up on this episode of Common Denominator.
Why is it that when human beings lose someone they love, they always say, why did God take them? Maybe a better question would be, what did I do to deserve them? Why did God give them to me?
This is Common Denominator, straight-up conversations with Moshe Popack. Relying on critical thinking and open-spirited debate, we invite you to find common ground on everyday issues and encourage you to be bold, to be optimistic, and to take action. To learn more, head to MoshePopack.com, and we'd be so grateful if you'd like, share, and subscribe to the show. Now, here's your host, Moshe Popack.
Hi, and welcome to Common Denominator. This week, I'm chatting with one of the preeminent authors in the world, Mitch Albom. Mitch's books have sold over 40 million copies, and his breakthrough memoir, Tuesdays with Morrie, is one of the best-selling memoirs of all time. His latest novel, The Stranger in the Lifeboat, is yet another #1 New York Times bestseller. I'll talk with Mitch about his extraordinary career, his artistic inspiration, and the lasting impact he hopes his books will have. Mitch, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome to Common Denominator.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, just finished reading Tuesdays with Morrie, a New York Times bestseller, 6 years in a row. Tremendous, tremendous success. I'm sure you didn't expect when you wrote that it would reach the levels that it reaches. Sitting here now, we're 2 years into COVID, and I just want to ask you, what do you think Morrie would have told people if he was alive today, from your time that you spent with him and all those years? What would he say today to people as far as how they should live their life?
Well, there were probably 2 or 3 or 4 of our kind of lessons that we did together every Tuesday while he was dying. That really resonate now and in the era that we're in, both with COVID and just in the general anguished state of, antagonism that we sort of have. One would be, he always said, love each other or perish. And we certainly seem to be doing the opposite. We seem to be leaning, especially with what's going on in Russia right now, we seem to be leaning far closer to the perishing than the loving one another. He also said, if you don't like the culture, don't buy it. And a lot of people have sort of stepped away from the presupposed norms of what society is supposed to be, what work is supposed to look like, how many hours you're supposed to put in, where you're supposed to live, what constitutes, the right place to live and the right community to be in. Many people have questioned all that and undone it. So that would have fit in. And thirdly, I think he would have said, don't look at this whole COVID thing as a curse. Look at it as a blessing for the time that you get to spend with the people that you really care about and the time you get to spend with yourself and thinking about yourself. The outside interference, television and internet, of course, wasn't really around when Morrie was there, but certainly TV and movies and all that was. And he didn't spend a lot of time on that. And as a result, he was able to be very present when he talked to me. I never felt like he was distracted. He never once would look at a watch or a clock or anything. He had that capability of just being one-on-one. And I think we've lost a lot of that in our rat race, hurry up, got to check my Instagram, my TikTok, my all the rest of it. And so losing some of that and having a chance to just, I know in my case, I had more family dinners over the course of the last 2 years than I've had for the last 20. And it's been a delight. We've had everybody around who had to kind of stay at our house, and they weren't working and weren't going to school. So our house became like the repository for it. Right. And it was great. It was exactly the kind of stuff Morrie and I used to do. So I think there were a lot of things that we spent time talking about that resonate today.
And I love that you wouldn't expect it. We're talking about, I guess, normalizing the concept of death. It's an area where all humans, we go there. And I personally, I try to journey in the spaces that are my own fears. And I see death as the greatest fear. And that you've been able to write that book and present it in a way that's very gentle. And I think that's why, it's one of the reasons why it really did tremendous. So I want to take a moment to talk about your new novel, #1 New York Times bestseller, The Stranger in the Lifeboat. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, Stranger in the Lifeboat is novel, and it begins with a luxury yacht manned by one of the richest men in the world and all his rich celebrity friends who are on it for a week-long cruise, and it inexplicably blows up in the middle of the ocean, and everybody perishes except 10 people, 5 of whom were the guests and 5 of whom were the staff that served them. And they find their way to a lifeboat, and they're out in this lifeboat in the middle of the ocean for 3 days, and nobody's coming for them. There's sharks in the water, and they're running out of food. They're crying out for help in their own ways. And then suddenly they see this body floating in the water, and they pull it into the raft, and it's this young guy who's alive. He's skinny, he's nondescript, there's nothing special about him. And they pepper him with questions. He doesn't say anything. And then finally, one of the passengers says, "Well, thank the Lord we found you." And he says, "I am the Lord." And that's the premise for the book. And it examines, not only in the novel, but for all of us, what do we do when we call out for help and help comes, but not in the form that we expected? What would you do if you cried out for God and somebody claiming to be God came in front of you and said, "I'm here," but it didn't look like God, didn't act like God, and said to you, "I can't save you unless everybody in the boat believes I am who I say I am at the same time." Would you believe, or would you say, "No, the guy's crazy, I can do this myself," which is what everybody in the boat says, at least at the start?
Well, I think I saw a stat in the U.S. It's about 40%, maybe a little higher, that have no belief in any God. My personal, I call it a rational spirituality, where if you just think about it logically, how could we have the sun, the moon, the stars, everything that exists, rationally and statistically, it's beyond our comprehension. So I don't talk about whether it's Islam, Buddhism, Judaism. I think about step one, to your point, a belief in something greater than self.
Right.
And in those hard times, you can't just always go within yourself. There's something greater, and the fact that you exist, it's the opposite way. I think the fact that you exist is in itself the greatest miracle. Therefore, because I'm a big believer in human potential, and within that, it breaks through the fears and the barriers.
Well, the ultimate fear, of course, as you said, is dying. And the ultimate fear that goes with dying is that nobody's going to help you. So this is a novel that explores the whole idea of calling out for help. And I get to play God, as weird as it sounds, on some of the pages, which is always an interesting thing when people say, "Well, what's that like?" I always say, "Well, you type like this, you want to make sure that there's no lightning bolt going to come down and hit your computer." But I get to put the questions that you would ask God if he came on your podcast instead of me and said, "Well, I'll give you 60 seconds. Go ahead, fire away." I put those questions in the mouths of the passengers. So at various times, when they're in between, when they're busy trying to find food or trying to get water or trying to stay alive, and they'll ask him, "Well, if you're God, okay, do you answer prayers?" And he says, "I answer every prayer, but sometimes the answer is no," which is something that I've had to learn, the hard way, that it doesn't, just because things aren't coming to you when you want them to come to you, doesn't mean that your prayer is unheard. It may just be that it can't be answered. Maybe your prayer gets in the way of somebody else's prayer. I always, I covered a lot of sports in my life, and I always say, well, one team says, "Well, God wanted us to win today." And I said, "What does that mean? God wanted the other team to lose?" They both came in and they prayed, "Please, God, let us win." Can't both have it happen at the same time. So, there are many instances like that. Or, of course, the big one that everybody would want to ask, I would imagine, is, why do people have to die?
Right.
And what happens when they die? Or in this case, the person who asked it is brokenhearted over the loss of his wife. And he breaks down in front of this God-like, character and says, "Why did you take my wife? If you're God, then why did she have to die? Why did you take her?" And the response is, why is it that when human beings lose someone they love, they always say, "Why did God take them?" Maybe a better question would be, what did what did I do to deserve them? Why did God give them to me?
Wow.
What did I do to merit their love, their sweetness? Didn't you have moments like that with your wife? And he says, every day. And the God character says, well, those moments are a gift, but their absence isn't a punishment. I'm not here to punish you with death. This is all part of a bigger picture. I know that you cry when your loved ones leave this earth, but I can assure you they're not crying.
Wow.
And, I wrote that page as much for the readers as I did for myself, because I don't know how much you know about me, but my wife and I run an orphanage in Haiti that we're at every month.
Yes.
For the last 12 plus years. And we adopted a child from there a few years back who had a brain tumor. And we spent 2 years traveling around the world trying to find a cure for her. And in the end, there weren't no cures. There are no cures for what she had, but she did live 2 years, which is about a year and a half longer than they gave her. And we were able to become a family, and we had this amazing experience. And when she died, I was very angry, and like most people, and I got angry with God, my concept of God, and said, how can there be a benevolent force in the universe that isn't benevolent to a 7-year-old? But as the years passed and I began to write Strange in the Lifeboat, I began to look at it as like, well, wait a minute. Here we had never had children of our own, even though we always wanted to. And then in our mid-50s, suddenly we get this 5-year-old sleeping at the foot of our bed, bringing us all the joy that a child brings into a couple's life, the breakfasts and the jokes and the singing and the games.
Sure.
And we had that for 2 years. What did we do to deserve that in our mid-50s? Nobody gets that opportunity yet. Here we got this opportunity. So when I began to look at it less as why was she taken and more why was she given, the pain went away.
Yes, and I think that every time, I was just talking to my wife just yesterday about reflecting in actuality, every worst thing that we had as a family that happened to us, looking back now, it was the biggest blessing that we ever had happen in actuality. And then I think also about like, who are we, our little ego, to judge a particular set of facts, whatever they happen to be. It should happen this way. No, we're one of 7.8 billion, and billions of people live before us, and there's universes. And it's really, I think, the highest level. Always, for years and years, I guess I'm sensitive, and I always think within myself, what is the answer? The answer is, I think it's two things. It's really surrender and acceptance. That because that's what it is. We don't know. Nobody knows, and anybody that tells you that they know, I always say run the opposite way.
Well, in addition to the two characteristics, you maybe a relative to it is humility.
Yeah.
Is believing that you're not the be all end all of the universe. And of course, if you believe in any kind of higher power, whatever structure it takes, then you have to be humble, because you need to be humble in the face of the creation of that. And what you said before about, every bad thing, that's really the underpinning of the Stranger in the Lifeboat, because when we ask for help these days, even when we pray, it seems that most of us want it like that. Like we prayed on Tuesday, the answer should come on Wednesday. Doesn't come on Wednesday, we get like, well, all right, I'll pray on Wednesday. Oh, if it's here by Thursday. It's like we're ordering a sandwich. And, if it doesn't come in a certain period of time and it doesn't have exactly what we want in it, then we get disappointed and we say, what is this? Well, it's not what I asked for. Well, most people are like what you just said. I meet them all the time. And they say, when this thing happened, I thought it was the worst thing that could have happened to me. But now I look back and I realize if that didn't happen, then this wouldn't have happened. And I wouldn't have met this person. I wouldn't have got married, wouldn't have had kids. Wouldn't have been. So I guess it was the best thing that could have happened to me. The best thing that could have happened to you 10 years from now. Right. Then it is the best thing that could have happened to you right now. But we don't believe that, because we don't have faith in that things are going to work out. We want our sandwich right now. And if we can't, it doesn't make sense to us in our small picture. We're not wise enough or patient enough to think about the big picture and say, somehow this is going to fit in. This is going to work out. When I do meet people who are like that, who have a bad thing happen and they somehow are able to keep a good countenance, and they go, I know this sounds crazy, but somehow this is going to work out. Somehow this is going to be the good thing. And you look at them and go, are you out of your mind? You just lost your job, your apartment, you're out on the street, you got your divorce, you got whatever it is. They always end up on their feet. They're always right. And I envy that, because I don't always have that. I wish I did, but I think it's a good trait to try to develop.
Yeah, I always think, right, it's the same glass, and the glass is either half full or half empty, right? And my whole thing is that I always think, what is actually happening? It's in our mind, in our brain. We're programmed to the negative, and starts with the mind, and then it comes to our action. So if we're programmed negative, we're going to do negative things. But if we can do the intentional work to have positive thoughts, to have hope, right? I think
Right.
nowadays that's waning a lot. The hope, people are broken, and it's tough. And so people like yourself that have that platform, that's putting out the ideas of hope and creating a different narrative. But you see how popular it is, that people want that. So I applaud you for that, for sure. It's really great.
Well, hope, it's funny you say about hope. I try to do that in all my books, and I believe that's a really important quality to have. And there was a critic once who was trying to be disparaging, and wrote of me, "He's the king of hope." And I always thought, like, I'll take that. They can put that on my tombstone, but it was funny because this person thought that it was an insult. He was so, books shouldn't be hopeful, and books should be dark, and should be full of angst, and, they should explore the darkest corners of the human experience. And if they don't, they're not really literature. And okay, well, everybody's entitled to their take on things. But to dismiss somebody and say that's a negative, the king of hope, it's like finding a jewel in the junkyard and saying, who threw this away? I'll take it. And so thank you for that compliment, because I think anyone who can dispense hope in this world is doing good.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was just I had a meeting this morning, and we talked about that. Meaning, if we can get together as many people, even though hope seems abstract, right? It seems abstract, and it's like, oh, you're just being overly optimistic. But no, you need a starting point. And I believe that hope of a greater day, next day will be better. Things will be better.
Right.
I wanna ask you, the time you spent with Morrie, what was the greatest lesson for you as you're looking back now, 20 plus years, how it shaped your day-to-day living?
Well, for me, and of course it's different for everybody, and people read Tuesdays with Morrie and draw different things out of it. So I don't want anybody to think I'm saying this is more important than any of the others. But to answer the question that you asked in terms of me, so it was actually kind of a sideways lesson. I had noticed that people would come to visit Morrie, sometimes on Tuesdays, most of the time other days of the week, but I would be there and I would see. And there was a lot of people who came because he had been on television, so they were aware he was sick, but they really didn't know him very well. And so they would practice, like they bring a lot of funny things or pictures or something, because they were so worried about visiting with someone who was dying. They thought they had to cheer him up. So they would stand outside the room and wait for him to be ready, and they'd be like psyching themselves up, going to tell him funny stories, going to cheer him up. And then they would go in and the door would close, and they would come out an hour later in tears. But they would be crying about their love life, their divorce, their job, their whatever. And they would say, well, I don't know what happened. I went in, I tried to cheer him up, but then after 5 minutes, he started asking me questions, so I answered. Then he started really asking me questions, so I really started answering. Then he started really asking me questions, and I really opened up. And next thing I know, I was crying. I went to comfort him, but he ended up comforting me. So I saw this happen enough times that I went into Morrie, and he said, I don't understand. You're the one who's dying. Why don't you just say, let's not talk about your problems. Let's talk about my problems. I'm dying. Yeah. And he said, Mitch, why would I ever take from people like that? Taking just makes me feel like I'm dying. Giving makes me feel like I'm living. Giving makes me feel like I'm living. It's a profound sentence. It rhymes, so it's easy to remember. And it has had the most profound effect on me in terms of how I live my life, because my life now is 65% of my time is spent in charitable endeavors at an orphanage in Haiti, running charities here in Detroit, which I don't want any
Right.
accolades for.
No, I know you.
It's quite the
Right. I know you have the
it's
Say Detroit and Have Faith Haiti Mission and Orphanage in Haiti
right.
and in Detroit, where you go. And I think you go to Haiti, like you said, once a month.
every month.
Every month.
Every
yeah.
month. And
Yeah.
nine charities I operate here, but I am the most alive when I'm
Yes.
doing those things. I sleep better on a 4-inch mattress in 100-degree heat in Haiti than I do in a very nice suburban home here in Detroit, because I hear the kids in the morning when I wake up. I know that I'm doing something that matters. I'm giving of my time and energy and effort, and these kids are better for it. So he was so right about that. Giving is living, and that's profoundly affected me.
That message, I hope it ripples through every single listener and everybody out there, because that does shapes how I live. It shapes how my wife lives, and everybody should take that message, because it really makes a difference. How can we learn more about you and get some of your books?
Well, I mean, anything anybody wants to know about me is just like everybody else in the world these days. Just type myname.com, mitchalbom.com, and there's all the website and all the connections. But more importantly than learning about me, they can connect to our charities, particularly our orphanage, havefaithhaiti.org, if they want to go straight there and skip over the mitchalbom.com stuff. It's all there. The story of our orphanage is there, the history of it and everything. And if people want to help us or volunteer or anything like that, the opportunities are there. My books are available wherever you can get books, and I'm always happy if someone takes the time to pick one up and read it. I hope it has a positive effect on them.
Really tremendous gratitude and an honor to spend this time with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Moshe.
Thank you.
It's
so
nice
much.
to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Common Denominator podcast. Join us next week for another inspiring, impactful, and empowering conversation. To learn more about Moshe, head to moshepopack.com. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share it. And we'd be grateful if you could rate, review, and subscribe to the show.